Get out of my kitchen. My mother-in-law's voice cracked like a whip across the steamy restaurant kitchen. You have no right to change my son's legacy. I stood frozen, the new menu draft trembling in my hands, sauce from an overturned pot slowly spreading across the tiled floor between us. The kitchen staff had gone deathly silent, pretending to be invisible while witnessing the showdown they'd probably been expecting for months. This restaurant is going bankrupt, Evelyn, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. The books don't lie. We'll be closed in 3 months unless something changes. You think your fancy New York ideas are going to save us? She laughed bitterly, gesturing around the worn kitchen of Bella Notte, the Italian restaurant that had been in my husband's family for 40 years. This place survived 2 recessions and a flood before you ever showed up in your designer heels. I felt my face flush hot with anger and embarrassment. 6 months ago, I was a respected marketing executive in Manhattan. Now I was standing in a failing restaurant in small-town Pennsylvania, facing a woman who had made it her mission to undermine me at every turn. Mom, that's enough. My husband Michael appeared in the doorway, his face pale. He'd clearly heard everything. What he said next would determine whether our marriage had any chance of surviving. I watched his eyes dart between his mother and me, seeing the same hesitation I'd witnessed a dozen times before. Then his gaze dropped to my still flat stomach, where our unborn child, the grandchild his mother didn't yet know about, was growing. We need to talk, he finally said. All of us. How had I ended up here? It certainly wasn't where I'd pictured myself at 35. 8 months earlier, I was Catherine Reynolds, marketing director at Apex Solutions in Manhattan, with a corner office overlooking Central Park. Michael and I had been married for 3 years, living in our trendy Brooklyn brownstone. We did the city couple thing perfectly: weekend brunches, yoga classes, and planning exotic vacations for someday when we weren't so busy climbing our respective career ladders. Then the call came that changed everything. Michael's father had died, suddenly, of a heart attack. I still remember the funeral in Riverview, the small Pennsylvania town where Michael grew up. Hundreds of people packed into the church and later lined up at Bella Notte, where the family hosted the reception. Everyone had a story about Frank Moretti and his legendary hospitality. He gave me my first job washing dishes when I was 14. He catered my wedding at cost when we were broke newlyweds. He helped me pay for culinary school. Standing beside Michael as he greeted mourners, I realized there was a whole side to my husband's life I barely knew. In our New York existence, we rarely discussed Riverview or Bella Notte. Michael had left that world behind to become an architect, visiting his parents only on major holidays. I'd met his parents just a handful of times, brief encounters that were cordial but not particularly warm. It was after the funeral, sitting in Frank's cluttered office at the back of the restaurant, that the lawyer delivered the news. Frank's will is quite straightforward, the attorney explained. The house goes to Evelyn, of course, and Bella Notte goes to Michael. I watched my husband's face shift from shock to something like dread. His mother, Evelyn, sat rigidly beside him. But I have my firm in New York, Michael protested. Dad knew that. He never expected me to come back and run the restaurant. The attorney shuffled uncomfortably. There's a letter as well, he said, pulling an envelope from his briefcase. Frank asked that you read it privately. Later that night in his childhood bedroom, Michael read his father's letter aloud to me. Frank Moretti had known exactly what he was doing. He believed his son had the vision to bring new life to the family business, to honor its legacy while moving it forward. You may have built beautiful buildings in New York, Frank wrote, but your foundation is here in Riverview. I've never asked much of you, son. I'm asking this now. That night, Michael cried in my arms for the first time in our marriage. What do we do, Kate? He whispered into the darkness. We could sell it, I suggested gently. Your father would understand. But would I forgive myself? He replied. 2 weeks later, he surprised me by suggesting a temporary move to Riverview. Just 6 months, he said, to get the restaurant in order, possibly prepare it for sale to the right buyer. We owe it to my dad to at least try, he argued. I agreed, reluctantly. I negotiated a 6-month remote work arrangement with my company, sublet our Brooklyn apartment, and packed up my city life. It was supposed to be temporary. I should have known better when I saw the look in Evelyn Moretti's eyes as we carried our suitcases into her house, where we would stay, just until we figure things out. She embraced her son warmly, then turned to me with a tight smile. "Catherine," she said, "I'm sure this must be quite an adjustment for you." The way she emphasized adjustment made it clear. In her mind, I was a city interloper who had taken her son away. Now circumstances had brought him home, and she wasn't about to let me take him again. The first few weeks were a blur of funeral casseroles, condolence calls, and Michael familiarizing himself with the restaurant operations. I worked remotely during the day and joined him at Bella Notte in the evenings, watching as he reacquainted himself with his father's world. It was during the 3rd week that I first noticed something odd in the restaurant's books. "Michael, these numbers don't add up," I said one night as we sat at the kitchen table, spreadsheets scattered between us. "What do you mean?" He looked up from his laptop, exhaustion etched on his face. "The reported food costs versus income. There's a discrepancy. A big one." That was the beginning of our discovery that Bella Notte, the beloved community institution, was hemorrhaging money. Frank had kept the restaurant afloat through personal loans and creative accounting, hiding the reality from everyone, including his wife. Why wouldn't he tell me? Michael kept asking, stunned by the revelation. The answer came from Tony, the head chef who had worked alongside Frank for 20 years. "Your father was proud, Michael. Too proud to admit that the world was changing around him. The new chain restaurants on the highway were killing us, but he kept believing people would choose quality and tradition. The more we dug, the worse it looked. Bella Notte needed a complete overhaul, menu, marketing, decor, everything, if it had any chance of survival." When Michael shared this reality with his mother, she refused to believe it. "Your father knew what he was doing," she insisted. "We just need to keep everything exactly as he would have wanted." That was when the battle lines were drawn. Michael and I began developing plans to modernize the restaurant. Evelyn resisted every suggestion, from updating the heavy, outdated decor to streamlining the extensive menu that required keeping expensive, often wasted inventory. "This isn't what Frank would want," became her mantra. The tension escalated when I discovered another troubling pattern in the books, large cash withdrawals that couldn't be accounted for. When I gently raised this with Evelyn, suggesting we might need a more rigorous accounting system, her response was immediate and furious. "Are you accusing me of something, Catherine? First, you want to destroy everything my husband built, and now you're implying I'm stealing. That's not what I don't need to explain myself to you. This business survived for 40 years without your spreadsheets and flowcharts." Michael, caught between his mother and me, tried to mediate but often ended up pleasing neither of us. At night, he would collapse into bed, physically and emotionally drained. "She's just grieving," he would say. "She'll come around." But as weeks turned into months, she didn't come around. Instead, she became increasingly hostile toward me while clinging desperately to Michael. She would call him for emergencies that mysteriously occurred whenever we had planned time alone. She would reminisce about his childhood in front of me, emphasizing stories I wasn't part of. She made sure I remained an outsider. Meanwhile, my remote work arrangement was becoming strained. My boss was pressuring me to return to New York, and the restaurant was consuming more and more of my time. Something had to give. That's when I made a fateful decision. If we were going to save Bella Notte, and by extension, my marriage, I needed to commit fully. I resigned from my position in New York and threw myself into the restaurant revitalization. The day I submitted my resignation, I also discovered I was pregnant. I kept both pieces of news to myself temporarily, working furiously on a comprehensive revival plan for Bella Notte. I researched successful independent restaurants, created marketing strategies, designed a new menu that honored the classics while introducing fresher, more cost-effective options. I was going to prove to Evelyn, and maybe to myself, that I belonged in this family legacy. That was the plan I was holding when she confronted me in the kitchen, the plan that now lay splattered with marinara sauce on the floor between us. The three of us sat in Frank's office, still untouched since his death, his reading glasses still perched on piles of invoices. "This isn't working," Michael stated flatly. "We can't run a business with this level of conflict." Evelyn sat with her arms crossed. "I agree. Catherine clearly doesn't understand our traditions, our community. Perhaps she should return to New York where she belongs." The word stung, even though I'd heard variations of this sentiment for months. But this time, something snapped inside me. "I'm pregnant," I announced. The room went silent. Michael's jaw dropped. This wasn't how we had planned to share the news. Evelyn's expression froze somewhere between shock and calculation. We're having a baby?" Michael finally managed. I nodded, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. "I found out last week." "Oh my God." His face broke into a cautious smile. "Dad would have been so happy." "Yes," Evelyn said slowly. "Frank would have loved another grandchild." Her tone softened slightly, but her eyes remained wary. "All the more reason why we need to preserve his legacy. For the next generation." I took a deep breath. "I agree, Evelyn. Your husband built something special here. But preserving his legacy doesn't mean letting it crumble because we're afraid to adapt." Before she could respond, I retrieved my sauce-stained proposal from the kitchen and laid it on the desk. "I've spent weeks on this. It honors everything special about Bella Notte while making it viable for the future. And there's something else you should see." I pulled out a folder containing printouts of bank statements and withdrawal slips. I found these while organizing the office. Large cash withdrawals, signed by Frank, with no corresponding business expenses. Evelyn's face paled. Michael leaned forward, confusion etched on his face. "What is this, Mom? Do you know about these?" Evelyn's composure cracked. Her shoulders slumped as she reached for the papers with trembling hands. "Your father didn't want anyone to know," she whispered. "He was so proud." "Know what?" Michael pressed. "That he was paying for Tommy Janelli's cancer treatments," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Tommy worked here for 30 years and had no insurance. When he got sick last year, your father couldn't turn his back on him." I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I had assumed the worst, perhaps embezzlement or gambling debts, when the truth was so characteristically generous. Dad was spending his retirement savings on Tommy's medical bills? Michael asked incredulously. Evelyn nodded. And helping his daughter with college tuition. And keeping Giuseppe's bakery afloat when Maria broke her hip. Your father believed in taking care of our own. That's why there was no money left, I realized aloud. He gave it all away. He always said the restaurant made enough as long as everyone in our community had enough, Evelyn confirmed, wiping away a tear. I've been trying to keep his promises, but without him. For the first time, I saw Evelyn not as my adversary, but as a widow desperately trying to honor her husband's memory the only way she knew how. And perhaps for the first time, she saw me not as the woman who took her son away, but as someone who might help carry that legacy forward. Evelyn, I said gently, I think there's a way to honor Frank's generosity while ensuring the restaurant survives. We can't help anyone if we go bankrupt. I turned to the last page of my proposal, a community engagement plan that included a pay-it-forward menu option and a scholarship program for local culinary students. We modernize to survive, but we keep the heart of what Frank built. Michael reached across the desk, taking both his mother's hand and mine. This is what Dad would want, the best of both worlds. His compassion and Kate's business sense. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, studying my proposal. Finally, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Frank always said Michael had the best taste in everything, she said with a hint of a smile. I suppose that includes wives. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, But it was a beginning. 6 months later, the grand reopening of Bella Notte was the talk of Riverview. The interior had been refreshed to feel both modern and comfortably familiar. The menu featured Frank's classics alongside new seasonal offerings. A wall near the entrance displayed photographs of the restaurant's history, with Frank's smiling face at the center. Most importantly, a small sign at the register explained the Frank Moretti Community Table program, where customers could contribute to subsidized meals for those in need and support the Culinary Scholarship Fund. As I stood at the hostess station, now visibly pregnant, welcoming guests to the revitalized restaurant, I caught sight of Evelyn in the kitchen. She was showing one of the new servers the proper way to plate Frank's signature lasagna, insisting that some traditions couldn't be improved upon. "You've done something miraculous here," Michael whispered in my ear as he passed by with wine glasses for table 7. "You've made it feel like Dad is still with us while creating something new." Later that night, after the last customers had left and the staff had gone home, Evelyn approached me as I tallied the night's impressive receipts. "Catherine," she said, setting a small gift bag on the counter. "This is for you." "For the baby." Inside was a hand-knitted baby blanket in the colors of the Italian flag, red, white, and green. "I made one for Michael when I was expecting," she explained. "And Frank always said traditions matter." I felt tears spring to my eyes as I ran my fingers over the soft yarn. "It's beautiful, Evelyn." "Thank you." She nodded, then gestured around the restaurant. "This is beautiful too. What you've done here." She hesitated, then added, "Frank would be proud of both of you." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Evelyn, would you show me how to make Frank's tiramisu sometime? The real way, not from the recipe card." A smile spread across her face, genuine, without the usual edge of reservation. "I'd like that," she said. "There are some secrets that should stay in the family." In that moment, standing in the warm glow of the restaurant kitchen, my hand resting on my growing belly, I realized that I had found my place in this legacy after all. Not by conquering or compromising, but by connecting, finding the common ground between tradition and innovation, between the family I married into and the one we were creating. The inheritance wasn't just a struggling restaurant. It was something far more valuable, the chance to build bridges rather than walls, to transform conflict into collaboration. And maybe, just maybe, to turn a reluctant mother-in-law into family. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.